Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into something that's just everywhere, isn't it? The huge world of true crime.
It really is.
You see it topping charts on YouTube, all over podcast feeds, consistently big on Netflix. But let's peel that back. Why are we so drawn to these stories? Murder, mystery, fear. What's the actual secret behind it?
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. Our mission really is to figure out why true crime grabs us like this. What does it tell us about, well, our own psychology, maybe society too, and importantly, how can you engage with it thoughtfully? Maybe even use it, for personal growth. We've looked at a bunch of stuff for this, articles on the big podcasts, psychoanalyses, chats about crime short stories, even some real life stories that kind of echo these themes.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. We know it's popular, but just how big is true crime? And what forms does it even take these days?
Well, it really, it properly exploded around 2014. A lot of that was down to one show, Serial, revisited a cold case. And it just became this huge sensation. I think it got something like 80 million downloads in just its first 2 years.
Wow, 80 million.
Yeah, it basically kickstarted the whole true crime podcast boom we're seeing now.
80 million downloads for one podcast back then. That's just mind-boggling. That really put it on the map for everyone, I guess.
It absolutely did. And it hasn't really slowed down since. I mean, today, true crime is the #1 genre on both Apple and Spotify podcast charts. Think about that. And about a full one-third of regular podcast listeners, they're actively listening to true crime.
A third. That's huge. Any idea who's listening?
Yeah, the demographics are interesting. Listeners tend to skew more female, and about 41% of regular listeners are in that 18 to 49 age group.
Okay, so it's massive in podcasts, but it's not just podcasts then, right? It feels like it bleeds into other things too.
Oh, definitely. You're right. Beyond podcasts, you see true crime in short stories, tons of documentaries, lots of news coverage, obviously. Forbes actually lists all sorts of true crime podcasts. You've got the ones focusing on serial murder. That's probably what jumps to mind first for most people. But then there are less conventional cases like Scamanda, about faking an illness for donations. Or even corporate stuff like The Dropout or The Shrink Next Door.
Oh, The Dropout. Yeah, I remember that. It was fascinating. Not violent crime at all, but the lies, the deception, it was still totally gripping.
Exactly. And that appeal works for shorter stuff too. Like Weedsy Prompts. They showcase crime short stories from writers all over. And it's everything from, lovable burglars to really chilling tales of murders. They talk about how addictive and bite-sized these stories could be, like a quick fix of mystery.
That makes sense. When something gets this big, you have to ask why. What's actually pulling us into these often pretty dark stories? What's going on in our heads?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. It seems to boil down to a few core psychological drivers. And the big secret. It's not just curiosity. It's more like our brain's deep-seated need to close open loops, even horrific ones.
Close open loops.
Yeah, so when you hear about an unresolved story, someone disappears suddenly, or there's a murder no one can figure out, your brain kicks into gear. It wants resolution. It wants to solve it, to understand, okay, what happened next? It's this really human need to connect with the people. You want to know about the victim's life, look for clues in the suspect's behavior, just grasp the whole human side of it. We hate unfinished stories.
Oh, okay. So it's less about the gore, maybe, and more about the human puzzle, the who was this person and how did this happen question.
Precisely. And that actually ties into the second reason. Seeking safety. Warnings, almost.
Safety. That sounds counterintuitive. Watching crime makes you feel safer.
Paradoxically, yeah, it can. When you observe dangers play out, like someone trusting the wrong person or making a fatal mistake, your brain processes those potential threats. But without any actual harm to you, it's like a survival instinct simulation. Lets you ask yourself, could that happen to me? What would I do? It's like a mental rehearsal for danger.
Huh. That's a really interesting way to think about it, learning the lesson without the real-world consequences.
Exactly. And then there's the dopamine factor.
Dopamine.
Right.
Like the pleasure chemical.
Well, it's more the motivation chemical here. Think about when a really shocking detail drops in a story vanished without a trace, or the killer lived right next door. Your brain reacts instantly. Your eyes might widen, heart rate might speed up, breathing changes. It flags this as potentially vital info. For survival, maybe? This alert system triggers dopamine. And that reward fuels your craving for more information. It drives you to understand, to complete the picture. That's why you often see people digging for more info after a show ends or wanting to talk about the case. Your brain is hunting for the truth. That's a powerful motivator.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling, that need to know everything once a story grabs you. But isn't there a risk there? Does that dopamine hit just make us like addicted to the shock value instead of really understanding the human tragedy behind it? I mean, what does all this intense fascination mean for us, and how can we be, mindful about consuming it?
That's such a crucial question. Because we have to keep reminding ourselves of the fundamental truth here. The real tension in true crime comes from its reality. These aren't just stories for entertainment. They're about real pain, real people, real families, real loss. And that demands, well, a different kind of engagement from us.
How so?
Well, if we only focus on the mystery, the twists, the drama, we risk turning genuine suffering into just another form of entertainment. And if you consume too much, constantly, you can get this kind of numbness where you might start to feel indifferent to the pain and just, click next without really thinking about the human cost.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that when you're caught up in the narrative itself. So is the key just self-reflection then? How do you walk that line? Engaging but not becoming numb?
That's exactly it. You have to ask yourself, honestly, am I watching this to learn something, maybe about safety or justice, or am I just trying to escape? Is the goal understanding, or is it just, avoiding boredom or dealing with my own stress? Escaping isn't always bad, of course, but true crime is heavy. It's real. If we binge it mindlessly, if we stop really thinking and feeling, it can change how we see things.
That's a really powerful point. So, okay, beyond just checking in with ourselves, are there practical things we can do to engage more responsibly?
Definitely. There are concrete steps you can take. First, pretty simple. Take breaks. Don't just binge dark story after dark story without giving your mind a rest. Let yourself decompress.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, mix it up. Balance the heavy true crime stuff with lighter things, different kinds of content. Give your mind and, frankly, your heart some variety.
Right.
Third, try shifting your focus. Look beyond just the drama. What does the story reveal about truth, about courage, about how the justice system works, or maybe doesn't work? Actively pull your focus back to the human beings involved.
That feels important. Focus on the people.
Yeah. And fourth, choose your sources carefully. Look for creators who seem to tell these stories with care, who prioritize the victim's perspectives, not just the sensationalism. And finally, just reflect. Afterwards, ask yourself, how did that story make me feel? What did I actually learn? Notice your reactions, too. Like, if you feel really strong anger about an injustice or frustration about how someone was dismissed because of their gender or race, that can actually tell you a lot about your own core values, about your inner world.
That's incredibly helpful advice. So, okay, we can consume it responsibly, but you mentioned earlier maybe this fascination could actually teach us something about ourselves or even help us, learn a language. That sounds unexpected.
It does, maybe, but it makes sense when you think about it, especially for language learners. True crime exposes you to real human language. It's natural, it's often emotionally charged, it's story-based English. That's way more dynamic than, reading a textbook.
I see, because it's real conversation, real emotion.
Exactly. And that emotional and intellectual engagement, it actually deepens language learning. It helps with remembering vocabulary, understanding context, much better retention. Plus, it gives you chances to practice describing complex situations, expressing your thoughts and feelings about them. You pick up practical vocabulary too, words like victim, suspect, investigation, evidence, alibi, justice. Really useful stuff.
That sounds like a surprisingly immersive and practical way to learn. Who knew?
Right. And beyond just language, it can build self-awareness too. If you reflect on why certain stories really grab you, you start uncovering things about your own fears, your values, maybe what kind of watcher you are, or you're drawn to the protection aspect, the empathy, the puzzle solving, or just the story itself. It also expands your emotional vocabulary. You learn to talk about complex feelings using phrases like heartbreaking, or I feel sorry for the family, or feeling sad but alert, or anxious, or even hopeful sometimes.
It's really interesting to think how these huge, often dramatic true crime stories might connect back to our own, smaller everyday experiences of things going wrong, loss, unexpected stuff, disruptions to our routines. We all have those moments that kind of feel like mini crimes against our plans or expectations, right?
Absolutely. Even on a much smaller scale, we've all felt that shock when a routine gets broken and something unexpected happens. Like, think about, I had this happen. A simple slip-up, forgetting to check pockets, meant my AirPods went through a full wash cycle.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was this little crime of accidental destruction, right? The tiny deviation from routine. But it led to permanent damage to one earbud. Tried everything, silica gel, those water-ejecting sounds. No luck. It just reminds you how easily things can unravel.
Yeah, that feeling of, if only I'd just done that one small thing differently.
Exactly. Or, another example, the feeling when something small gets stolen. It's a crime of opportunity. I actually had my Apple Watch stolen from a gym locker room once.
Real?
Yeah. And you think, this is a pretty safe country, cameras everywhere, but a locker room. That's one place there aren't cameras. It's a perfect little blind spot for a petty thief. And even though it's just a watch, that feeling of being a victim of that violation, however small the crime, it feels very real.
It really does underscore that. Even in places we think are safe, even with things that aren't, life or death, that feeling of being targeted, of experiencing that personal setback, it can still hit hard. It reminds you that these big true crime narratives, in a way, echo our own struggles with mistakes, with unexpected twists, and how we deal with unfairness. Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken today. From understanding just how massive true crime is and why it pulls us in psychologically, we've also really dug into how to navigate it responsibly, and even, surprisingly, how to use it for personal growth.
Yeah, and if we try to connect all this to the bigger picture, true crime really, at its heart, it holds up a mirror to the hidden corners of society. It shows us the shadows, the cracks, but also the untold stories of courage, pain, and resilience that exist within those shadows. It's not just about the darkness, it's about what the light reveals about all of us.
That really raises an important question for you, the listener. As you continue exploring these kinds of deep dives into complex subjects, think about this. What new insights are you actually looking for? About humanity, about justice, maybe even about yourself? What happens when you step into the shadows of these stories, but with open eyes and maybe an open heart? Because ultimately, the way we respond to pain, whether it's real pain right in front of us or pain recounted in a story, that response reveals the very truth of who we are.